And so I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit, who I am. As Piero said, I'm working at CARMA, the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics at Stanford. And these are some of this is a little bit of my studies. My studies have been very specifically in music technology, and that means I've often had sort of co-supervision between, for instance, computing and music in my studies, in the course of my studies. And these are some of the places that I've taught. I haven't taught on 4 continents, but I've taught in a few different places. And so I'm going to be showing you kind of an overview of some of my work and then concentrating on some of it. So a lot of this work involves instrument and interface design. And a lot of this design work is specifically in disability design, accessibility. Sometimes in music, we use the term accessible musical instruments, or AMIs. And these instruments are not only necessarily sonic, they could also be for audiovisual interaction. And then I also do interaction design, which often involves multimodality. So not only audiovisual. So for instance, what you're seeing here is these kind of patterns you see, that's a visual manifestation of sound, what's called cymatics. But in this work, there is also haptics, so the tactile manifestation of sound. And obviously this really crosses over with my work in inclusion by engaging with different modes of perception. And then I also do work that's in kind of musical theater, and a lot of this work specifically deals with feminist perspectives on technology, and that's something that I'll be talking about today or tonight. So I wanted to talk about this work in inclusion. It's very important in my development. This is a work you see here called Monga. And there's an article about it. So basically, this is also related to my research projects. These are 2 research projects that are in course. One is including a Horizon project, which involves centering disability, in this case, particularly in online experiences. These are some of the organizations that I work with. I'm on the international board of Share Music and Performing Arts. And these are some of the organizations that I've worked with on these projects. So Share Music Sweden is an organization specifically for inclusion in the performing arts. So in this work, Mångeväxter, just to give you an example, the idea was to create an engaging experience in which there was a fluidity of roles and functions in the process, sort of breaking down the binaries of user, designer, creator, performer, using terms more rather than user and designer, of participant, engaging in co-design. And this is part of Share Music's inclusive practice, which often brings together experienced artists from different disciplines with amateur musicians, and again, especially centering disabled artists. So here you see members of the Influence Ensemble, which is one of the ensembles based at Share Music. And I'll show you a little bit what was happening in this, why they're looking at this screen. But basically the themes of the work were developed in a series of workshops, and as were custom interfaces, which also had audiovisual mapping strategies that we worked on together. So second, while you look at this, so basically there's painting that's going on. The painting is producing a score for the musicians and is also producing the video. Here there's a custom interface. So what Peter had said, Peter Larsen, who's the performer here, who's been collaborating with Share Music for, I think now 20 years, he said he wanted a color organ. So we worked together to develop something where he could not only produce sound, but the other musicians are able to accompany him because he's also producing a score, um, which they're reading in real time from these monitors that you saw previously. And we also worked on the expressive control. Not only can he blow into this interface, but you can also bite down on it for some kind of timbral change. And then finally, this is a somewhat simple instrument, but what's important to me about this instrument is that the sound is actually radiating from the instrument itself. And this really was an important aspect for me to take a sort of leap from making interfaces that produce audio to dealing with physical instruments with different kinds of systems of control. So what you see pictured here is the piano machine, which I designed and created with Konstantin Leonenko at Goldsmith. This was the first version, which was kind of a prototype. And since then, we've made another more portable version, which I'll show you in the next slide here. So you see here, this is a version that these different, rather than having one piece, these different pieces fit into the piano. So it's a little more adaptable for different pianos. And also the whole thing fits into a carry-on case because it's just a series of pieces. And so basically there are microprocessors which are sending energy to these little motors, and I'll show you there's these little vibrating disc motors. They used to be like what called pager motors. So basically when there's energy sent to it, because it's sitting between the strings, it causes the strings to vibrate. I'll show you what that sounds like in the high register and the low register. So you can see I'm really pushing on that key after it's depressed. And what that does is that I'm able to change the volume dynamically. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with creating this kind of machine, is to have a system for the piano where there could be expressive control after the attack of the note. So once, this machine I created for myself, but also for other composers to use. So some other composers were using, actually, there's one version of it that belongs to an ensemble, and composers are composing pieces for it with that ensemble, called Explore Ensemble in the UK. And so someone saw this, and then it commissioned me for this piece, add a song, to use the piano machine in this. And in this piece, I'm also using AI to create the score, as well as having the piano machine, instead of being controlled in this one-to-one way, which you saw with the MIDI keyboard. Instead, it's actually reacting to the performers in real time, using machine learning. So this was for an event dedicated to Ada Lovelace at the Barbican in London. It's this series called Life Rewired, which was about basically technology in the arts, and particularly about AI. And then this particular event was curated by Emily Howard, who you see pictured here, who is the founder of the Center for Practice and Research in Science and Music, PRISM, which does a lot of research on, for instance, generative AI in music. And then there's a reprise, which I'm going to show you in the video, which was at the AI Music Creativity Conference in 2021. So I wanted to show you this timeline. This is something that I use sometimes in my teaching. And just to see that, this is 100 years before some of the most important experiments in AI composition, let's say, which is the Iliac suite. And so Ada Lovelace's theorization of a computer making music, a computer creating music, is just incredibly early and kind of incredible to contemplate. I always like to show this photo from the University of Illinois with one of these important first experiments was done, because you see there's a woman who's operating the machine, because of course those early jobs in telecommunications were largely occupied by women. So maybe some of you know, if I was in the room, I would ask you, who knows who Ada Lovelace is? You may have heard her referred to as the first programmer. I always put firsts in quotes in a way because I'm a little hesitant about firstism, right, as an idea. But she basically wrote the first algorithm for this theoretical analytical machine of Charles Babbage. So in a sense, she was a strong artificial intelligence skeptic, strong meaning, you know, independence, consciousness, and so on. As she said, computers can't create anything, for creation requires minimally originating something. But computers originate nothing. They merely do that which we order them via programs to do. We can discuss these these issues more maybe in the discussion after my presentation. I'm curious what other people think of her theories at the time. But she is someone who is cited extensively by Turing in his seminal article on computing machinery and intelligence. So it's just interesting that he's having this conversation with her across time, and that her theorization is so important. So we can talk about almost a kind of a Lovelace test. Only if computers originate things should they be believed to have minds. So Ada Lovelace actually specifically thought about the potential of computers for music. She's credited with the first published imagining of that. She said the mutual fundamental relations of music could be expressed by those of abstract science of apparitions, such that a machine could compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. So I'm asking myself in this Ada Lovelace project, Ada's song, what paradigms are working well in generative music? Because we know that there's some question of, you know, is text to music really the most appropriate paradigm as much as it is for image? You know, are we taking one paradigm for another art form that's maybe not so suitable for music? How can generative AI interact meaningfully with musicians in performance? So not just offline, but in a real performance situation. Also, how might in a performance these processes be made visible or audible to an audience? So this is something I was thinking is, what could the role of the piano machine be in setting apart what is created by AI and what is being performed by human musicians? So here I have this little demo to show you what a kind of similarity matching in the sound domain could look like. So here, this is a film. You know, there's some kind of like a voiceover in the film. So this starts with a voiceover, which I completely replaced with music. So automatically matching. So you'll hear a kind of speech-like quality to the music, and then you'll hear this sound and the original speech together.
Are we close to trauma, if I may be so bold?
Tragically. Her fiancé broke off the relationship the very day before they were due to be married.
Of course, I'd do anything to help Madame Malvina, but as I said, my voice is hopeless. I can't sing.
You need. You will.
That was just to demonstrate a little bit, oh, sorry, this is already, to what these generative processes can be like. And so you can imagine with these kind of practices, you can also create a score. There are also ways to orchestrate from that. So now I'm going to play just a little excerpt of this piece. And the thing to listen for is how the piano machine, which you'll hear from its distinctive sound, from what you heard in those little sample videos, how is it reacting to the performers in the live performance? Okay. And so finally, I wanted to talk about my current project that I'm embarking on, which is a music theater piece, this cyberfeminist futurist kind of opera. But before I talk about that one, just in general about these music theater pieces about feminist perspectives on technology, I wanted to show this earlier work, Parlor Sounds. So for me, these two works are going to be like kind of like a diptych. This Parlor Sounds is set in the past, so you can see, I don't know if you can quite see, this is quite vintage looking radio and so on. This is kind of a 1960s UK setting. That's where the work was created. And so basically it's about women interacting with technology in their environment. In this case, it was housekeeping instruments, appliances that are made into instruments. And so here, what I'll show you in a moment, which ones are instruments. And then in the other one is going to be a futurist environment where women are in outer space. And then, of course, all of their lives are mediated through technology necessarily. So this was there's an article about this piece, and I'll just show you which are the instruments. These are all instruments. The iron is actually a self-contained instrument that has a microphone, transducers, and accelerometer for the movement. I'll just play the very beginning of the So there was also a vacuum cleaner that was one of the instruments. So for this work, it's also going to be using biosensing soft robotics systems. This is the project team. And the idea is to develop these systems very much in collaboration. So Alexandra Kleiman is the librettist, and Marisol Montalvo and Donatien Michel Dansac are two of the performers who are both sopranos. And these are some of the project partners. So I'll be working on this over the next year with these two partners. with this funding. And this is just building on some of I haven't done that much work to date with soft robotics, but one project which I did was this hackathon project where we made a sex toy basically that was using soft robotics as well as haptics. So the idea of this project conceptually, and to sort of tie all these things together, is that having these flexible project roles, especially in dealing and with creating technology, centering on bodily expression. So in this case, the soft robotics are going to be a way of forming the cyborg self on stage, especially as it's using biosensing. Um, the technology is developed collaboratively through a co-design process. And this is very much in contrast to, I have to say, music is a very conservative area, including at Stanford in many ways. And so this is very much in that context of distinguishing from what's often been the roles of women in opera, having a lack of creative agency, hypersexualization, the hysterical woman, you can even look through the repertoire of these two women, Marisol Montalvo and Donassi and Michel Dansac, and see how many times they've played these kind of roles. So and there's a really great study about that, about called the opera and the doing of women. So I'll just leave you with the quote that I would rather be a cyborg than a goddess. So the idea of finding somewhere with the cyborg self to connect differently with these ideas. And soft robotics is in some ways being proposed as perhaps in itself um, a particularly organic, possibly even positing a feminist approach to these robotics. Thank you, and I will leave now to questions. I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine, thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, so everything went well with the video, so
Oh, great.
we solved that problem. Great. Okay, anybody has questions? Yes, unfortunately, she cannot hear you if you're there, so I will have to, huh? Oh, you come here. Oh, did you demonstrate haptics? No, I don't think so. She did mention haptics, yes. So Patricia, at one point you mentioned haptics.
Yes.
Haptics. Okay, the question is, can you elaborate on the implementation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, and it's true, it's hard to demonstrate. So let me say three quick things about the haptics to answer your question. One is that this project, which I had spoken about, maybe I'm just going to share quickly again so I can show you the slide when let's see, can I go back on this? Whoops, let me do this. So there was a slide where I was showing about the music project. So going back here, well, actually, one thing which I can show you is here. This was actually was a sex toy that had haptic feedback. So the idea is that this breast that you see here of silicone was the controller, and then the other part was sort of like a squeezing and vibrating part. And the point was to have haptic feedback in the controller so you would have an idea of what is the sensation that you're sending to your partner. And then you could have this situation, for instance, remotely. So there was really important to be able to feel the level of intensity through the haptics so that you would have an idea of, and there was also sonic feedback as well, to have an idea of what was happening with the interface on the other end. But the other thing I wanted to show you here right in the beginning is this project here. It's right before here. Yes. So this music project, haptics is a really big part of it. So basically it's the idea of making online experiences which have such a great potential to for inclusion in many ways, right? I mean, we heard that during some of the times of lockdown, for instance, disabled people who hadn't been able to get the accommodations which they needed, for instance, in their education, to be able to do things remotely if they had problems with mobility, suddenly they were able to have this access because things were online. However, there were so many lacks in terms of the accessibility of these tools, and also that everything is so hardwired for the audiovisual, just like the experience that you're having right now, that there's a need to reintroduce tactile experience to it. So that is a big part of the music project. We're working with a company in France called Actronica. Actronica often collaborates with, you see the third on the right here from this list, IRCAM, in Paris, in implementing haptics in various ways, and especially using conversion of haptics into sound. And then I guess the last thing is then in the Aurum, the piece that was the first one when I mentioned haptics all the way in the beginning, then that that had, corresponding to the cymatics, there was also haptics that were happening through the floor. There was entirely a wooden floor of a gallery space that we were able to use. So you were able to sit on the floor, have your hands on the floor to experience the sound in that way.
Oh, thank you for asking the question. It was a good question. Yeah, this was very interesting. Come here. I don't want to. She cannot hear you.
So you mentioned you mentioned that music is a pretty conservative area. Can you maybe elaborate it a little bit more? And follow-up question is, what is music to you? And if there's AI, what do you think is music to AI as well, like music to humans?
Yeah. Um, well, I think it's almost become a cliche, right? That things move a little bit more slowly in music than in some other disciplines, for instance, than visual art, just because of the way it's structured. I mean, I could do a whole kind of socioeconomic analysis of it. Basically at what age you might need to have access, right, to the resources to play a musical instrument. And there's certainly a lot of programs like El Sistema, which are designed to counteract that, and which completely change the landscape of who is making music in the places where it's implemented. So I would say without a real policy of trying to do that, without a real policy of not being, classist, sexist, racist, ableist, all of these things, that music just really gravitates towards these problems. I would say really more than other disciplines for various reasons. I mean, for instance, just the ableism, the kind of fetishism about the hearing, right? It's just so particular to music, when obviously that's not we have all different kinds of ways of experiencing sound. There are sound artists who are deaf or hard of hearing. So that's the kind of thing I would mean about conservatism. As far as AI, that's another really big question. And obviously an interesting one, and one I would like to engage with. I would just say this: there is both a huge potential, and again, this music project that I'm working on is very much using AI towards for instance, making these online experiences more fulfilling. For instance, a person who's alone at home, they could connect with a server and they could have, fairly meaningful musical exchanges. We're not saying as meaningful as with a human being, perhaps, but meaningful musical exchanges with an AI agent. That's one of the things that we're working with. Or an AI agent comes in and helps them to complete their compositions. But obviously, I think it almost goes without saying that there's huge questions about what kind of things some of these models are training on. I would just say I'm really grateful for the work of people like Holly Herndon and her Spawning, Ed Newton Rex, and Fairly Trained, who are taking on these issues and, you know, making sure that artists are not losing their work.
Excellent. Anything else? Thank you very much.